Well, you heard the news. Looks like no Michael Young for the opener and potentially for a majority of the season. Like Cole Kmet, he suffered a broken collarbone in practice this past week, so that takes another receiver that Ian Book can call upon for the opener and for the first several games. There is a possibility Cole Kmet, who also suffered a broken collarbone, the tight end, could be back for the Georgia game. They're still saying that's doubtful at this point. But, yeah, I tell you, you're playing hard stuff, getting guys ready, but you run the risk of getting guys hurt. And now that's bitten Brian Kelly twice the last couple of weeks. First Cole Kmet and now Michael Young. So there are options, obviously, on offense. So you've got Jafar Armstrong in the backfield and Tony Jones Jr. But other than maybe Brock Wright at tight end, the wide receiver position is looking a little bit bare at this point. So could be very interesting to see where those wide receiver targets come from for Ian Book, and that could make things a little bit tougher for the Louisville game, and that's certainly going to make it tougher when they make the trip down to Athens to face Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, you know, you're bringing in Louisville tomorrow night, some Monday night college football action. Give us a quick preview.
Labor Day, you mean.
Labor Day. I'm sorry. That's next week. I'm rushing the month along. I'm ready for
I got to say, I'm not a fan of that 8 p.m. start time because then you have that at 11 o'clock post-game show starts, and then it's 2 a.m., and I got to hustle back to, you know, get a little bit of sleep, but then get to the warehouse at 9 a.m. the following morning. So the timing of that's not exactly great for me, mind you.
Fun stuff. Well, let's get into today's game tonight, 7 o'clock. Big game everybody's going to be paying attention to, probably more attention to than they are the Bears and the Colts. But University of Miami Canes taking on number 8 Florida Gators at home. What say you, down in the swamp?
Yeah, they rarely meet. They battle for a trophy called the Seminole War Canoe, but I think the question we need to ask is Florida for real? Are they the team now that could jump into, you know, that big 3 or the big 2 conglomerate in the SEC, which involves Alabama and Georgia? I think this game is a game where I think if they win convincingly, I'd say there's a good place where you can put them in that group. But if they struggle to beat Miami, I just don't think they have the stuff to get to Alabama or to Georgia. And then you also have to concern yourself, well, are they going to be able to hold off the other teams in the SEC? Because there are several understudies in there, the Missouris, the Kentuckys, et cetera. And I think Rick Riggin would agree with me that those teams, there's several teams in the SEC where if you stub your toe just a little bit, you can certainly fall well down the list. So this is a game I think Florida, we need to learn a lot more about Florida. And then, of course, Miami, unranked coming into this year, how good a team are they? I mean, are they a team that could challenge, you know, the Florida States, the Clemsons, and the ACC? That's something we don't know about either. So I think you're going to learn a lot about 2 teams that could be outside playoff contenders, but I think right now the question is just how good are these teams in reality? Because I think there's question marks about if Florida is really a top 10 team, and is there questions that Miami is not as good as people think. I think Miami's a much better team than what they're being advertised, and I don't think Florida is as good a team as they're being advertised at this point based on the preseason polls.
Let's get into some of the games that are going on today. Certainly Florida A&M and UCF. Neither one of those are ranked teams, and what are your thoughts on that game?
The key of that game is just how good is Brandon Wimbush going to perform. Is he going to fall flat on his face like he did last year when Notre Dame barely beat teams like Ball State? If that's the case, I'd say UCF is not going to be your mid-major contender to make a big run. That's the big question in my mind. I expect UCF to beat Florida A&M easily, but I think the performance of Brandon Wimbush, I think, is going to be the key thing. Is he going to perform well in that contest or not?
Big game down in Clemson. Number 1 Clemson taking on the Georgia Tech Shockers.
The Yellow Jackets.
Jackets, sorry. I'm all over the board today.
Yeah, Georgia Tech, I think, is in a rebuilding mode. Obviously, Paul Johnson retired after last year, so they're going back to a pro-style offense with the triple option. So I'll be very curious to see if they have the right cogs in there to make such a major change in offensive philosophy. and it's going to be tough doing it against a Clemson team. I think, obviously, that, again, is loaded with Trevor Lawrence and several key cogs, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think Clemson will easily win this game by at least 3 scores.
The other game, another game tonight, 8:30, Texas State against in-state rival, if you will. Not really a rival, but certainly in-state team, number 12, Texas A&M.
Another easy game set up there. And yet Texas State, a really recent addition to the FBS. Texas A&M, this should be a game they should have no problems considering it's at College Station. But if it is close, that certainly is going to bring up a few question marks looking ahead of the SEC slate.
And then the late game tonight, the Utes, number 14, Utah taking on BYU.
I got to say, Utah being rated in the top 15 of the polls is a head-scratcher. I have not seen things that tell me that this team is for real. I mean, to make that big of a jump after, a subpar average season last year, I just don't see it. I think this game could be a possibility with the BYU team trying to bounce back from a couple lousy years. If BYU comes close to winning, if not winning this game, I would not be surprised.
Well, it certainly would be a big win for BYU, that's for sure. All right, let's real quickly, just get caught up on some high school football regionally. Help us play the Homer card. I know you do a real good job of covering high school football up there in northern Indiana. We know Carmel had a big loss yesterday. What do we know? Bring us up to speed regionally here in Indiana, some high school football.
Yeah, Carmel obviously lost to Louisville Trinity 41-14, but I think Carmel still is one of the favorites when they get to the Metro Interscholastic high school season with the loaded field, even though there's a bunch of teams, Warren Central, Central Grove, look solid. I think Carmel still is the team to beat there. And then northern Indiana, I don't know what Penn's doing, but they certainly are not helping themselves. I don't think Valpo has improved that much to where they beat Penn 34-14 last night. I didn't get the full results on the game, but I got to say, a very disturbing performance from Penn, especially a team that usually is a contender for the state finals, if not state championships. So certainly Corey Yeoman and the guys need to look and get the things back in gear, looking ahead to an NIC schedule that is loaded, especially when you got teams like Mishawaka, who even with a very poor start with 3 turnovers in the first half against Portage, they come back and still win 42-7, which says I think that even with all the changes they made, they're still strong, especially when you got guys like Derek Dawson, Joe Willis, and their defensive side of the ball. Got a big test, though, against East Oval next week. They made a big comeback to beat Plymouth, so East Oval out on the road is going to be a tough game, obviously a Class 4A mainstay when we get to playoff time. And obviously it's tough to see the battle for the Manji line go, but Elkhart Central beat Memorial 41-21 last night. Last time the Manji line is going to be up for grabs. Of course, those two schools are merging after the 2019-2020 school year just into Elkhart, so it'll be the Blazers next year in Class 6A. But one of the longest rivalries in Indiana high school football. It's sad to see it go, but again, the merging of the two schools leading to an end of a long-time tradition for the battle for the Manji Lions. So unfortunately, that came to an end last night.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Matthew Embry, WSBT up in South Bend, joins us. Matthew, Chicago Bears come to town here in Indianapolis. Jacoby Brissett sets out. Andrew Luck sets out. All the starters sets out. Maybe we can read in between the tea leaves. I'm still very optimistic to think that we will see Andrew Luck in week 1. If not, they will have themselves what they call a PR nightmare, a big one on their hands. And the fact is that Andrew Luck has not spoken to the media since July 30th. Chuck Pagano makes his return to Indianapolis as the defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. Obviously, this is a business trip for him. The Chicago Bears and the Indianapolis Colts pretend football, but what are your thoughts, sir?
I think right now, if you're looking at the Colts, you need to see them improve their defense. Their defenses look very sluggish in the first 2 preseason games, and I think that's the side of the ball. It's not necessarily Andrew Luck. concerns whether or not he's going to play. I think the concern right now is they're going to be able to stop teams from scoring a excessive amount of points. At this point, their defense looks very sluggish, and it's a scary reminder to the way they were in the late 90s, early 2000s when they had Peyton Manning getting all the job done, and their defense couldn't hold water. It's starting to look like that same scenario is starting to form right now in the Luck area, and that's a concerning factor if you're a fan of the Colts. As for the Bears, I think they're making strides, but I still don't think they're quite there yet. They need that one breakout player on offense, I think, to help them make that big jump and be a challenger in that NFC North, and they still haven't found it yet. They got the defensive cogs to do it, but offensively they still need some work.
Well, we'll see what happens. Obviously, I say it's pretend football. I know there's a lot of people still competing for a job on the roster, and they're getting on tape. So for the players that are on the field, it means a lot more than. But it's a fun environment. I'll be at that game. I'm going to go to the Bullseye Event Group VIP tailgate party as well. That's going to be a blast. So it's going to be fun to go down and hang out and just get the feel of football season as we get things rolling real quickly up there in your neck of the woods. I know a team that Notre Dame covers very well, and that's the Michigan Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines. What are we looking at with them going into 2019-2020 season?
Same question as always with them. Can they avoid winning the games they should easily avoid losing the games they should easily win? I think you look at right now, and Ohio State is clear for the taking right now. Can just Michigan step up and get the job done against them? Can they get the job done against Michigan State, against Notre Dame? Those are still major question marks in my mind right now. Is can those teams be beaten by Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines? And my answer on that is not a definitive yes yet. So they are still a team that's got a lot to prove to me, and I think a lot of the experts, if they want to be considered a team that can make the playoffs.
What about Michigan State Spartans?
I think they are not getting the respect they should be getting. I think Mark D'Antonio does a great job with this team, and I just don't think they're getting the respect that they deserve at this point. I think they will surprise a lot of people. They are not a mid-pack team as many people think they are in the Big Ten.
I'm sorry, I accidentally had my mic muted there. I'm good for that at least once a week. That's for sure. All right, Matthew Embry, WSBT up in South Bend. You know, we had talk a little bit about some NASCAR news, and we're going to be getting into that with Steve Wilson here in just a minute in more detail there in Road America this weekend. But news came out of the Dale Jr. camp. One, it looked like the landing gear malfunction that caused that tragic, dangerous plane crash that, well, let's face it, I mean, we came very close to losing one of the greatest race car drivers of all time, his wife, daughter, dog, and two pilots. So thank God that did not happen. He issued a statement here over the last few days that he does plan to race in Darlington. What are your thoughts?
He should. I still think he's in the wrong idea. And for a place where Darlington, where you have to have your head on straight. Remember what happened a few years ago when Dale Earnhardt fell asleep at the wheel and nearly caused a catastrophe at the start of that event back, I believe, in 98 or 99, the Southern 500. Coming off of that just recently, I think that's not a good idea. I think Dale Jr. should really second guess and really think about pulling out and maybe putting someone else in that car for his own safety and own well-being, because Darlington, that is a track where you have to keep your full focus for the entire distance of that race. You just cannot take a lapse. Otherwise, you're in the fence and you're out of luck.
Well, but then on the other side of it, maybe it's just exactly what he needs. You know, he's a race car driver. That's what he needs. That's his element. That's his space. That might be very therapeutical for him and his family, for that matter, because that's really what they know. And his young daughter, that's all she knows is the racetrack. So there might be some good positive things there with that, but I do agree with you, Matthew, that is a track that requires a lot of attention, if you will. Matthew, any final thoughts, words of wisdom, anything you would like to bestow upon us?
I tell you, I will say very troubled by the laziness of some of the restaurants. I mean, they're actually putting a waiting list at IHOP when there's only 20% capacity. and there's still plenty of tables available, and they're trying to put me on a waiting list for a single table. Don't understand.